Now, I tell these stories, of course, in part, I'm trying to drum up custom to pretend, but also to raise a more general issue germane to this discussion. Others have talked about, and may well talk about, the problems of conservation in their field, and I've already hinted at some of the issues that faced this film. It was a nitrate film, as I've mentioned, and in need of very careful care, a cold room, and a building far away from others, and it was so fragile that it could not be screened without potential damage. So there were some problems of conservation and preservation that had to be dealt with before it could be screened. Remember, I first viewed the film frame by frame, winding it by hand from one reel to another over a light tray with a magnifying glass. It was screened for the first time only when it was converted to safety film. In the process of making the film viewable, it turned out that the original nitrate needed some cleaning. As this image shows, oh, whoops, sorry, that's the score. That image doesn't show it at all. But the next image shows bugs had literally gotten into the works and needed to be flushed out. I don't know whether you can see it, but this is a bug. Any entomologist in the room, perhaps it's even an Australian bug, but long dead. It actually, you know, at this size, it's sort of, has anybody ever seen William Castle's The Tingler? No. People would scream if they had. I'm not an expert on the, I can explain that comment, by the way, in the discussion afterwards. It's an aside. I'm not an expert on techniques of conservation, but the company that made the safety film first had to clean the film, flush out the bugs, the dust, and other detritus, repair splices and sprockets, measure shrinkage, film shrink over time, and add a leader, a bit of film at the beginning, before it could make the safety copy. So the original nitrate film was modified in the course of conservation, and it still survives in some dark, cold corner of the Library of Congress. The copy you will see on the 10 is taken from the safety film and went through a complex series of modifications, which means that it really only approximates the original. First, it turns out that the safety film was not a simple mirror copy of the original nitrate film. The process of making the copy involved, first of all, making a black and white copy of the film, not a tinted one, and then adding in the color later on. The technicians who did the work had to find the right tints, match them to the original, and then add them onto the black and white, the white print. A bit like matching colors if you repaint a damaged car. Sometimes they're close, sometimes not. But the process of preservation did not end here. The NLM required 2 other copies to be made: a high-quality videotape to ensure that the safety film was not damaged with constant use, and a DVD for routine viewing to ensure that the high-quality tape was not damaged. In each stage, there were judgments to be made, which made each stage as much an artifact as a faithful reproduction of the original nitrate film. I don't have time to go into these judgments, and the laboratory that did the work could tell you much more about the technicalities of this than I ever could. But the point should be clear about the artifactual nature of these products and of the preservation process. In the case of the color of the film, it was not even clear to what extent the colors on the original nitrate film from Australia had changed over time. As the lab technicians acknowledged, the colors in the nitrate film in 2006 might have been very different to those at first showing in 1921, fading or whatever, with consequent knock-on effects for the colors of the copies. What you'll see is a best guess of what the original film looked like, with a guess all the same by the technicians who did the conversion. It was, I should say, also an expensive guess or series of guesses. The entire process of preserving the nitrate film, making a safety film, video, and DVD copies cost something like just under $7,000 for the whole thing, which makes one wonder how much can be preserved at this sort of cost. I hope one of my points has come across, which is the artifactual nature of the preservation process. But I hope also to raise a final point, which is about how we go about choosing which films to preserve, especially given the high cost of preservation and conservation. Part of the issue is that we know so little about the range of films that were made. In the case of ephemeral or sponsored films, such as The Reward of Courage, there is no equivalent of the various catalogues of entertainment films, which give you an indication of the range of films produced, surviving and not surviving. We know that a significant proportion of early entertainment films have vanished, and the proportion of early ephemeral or sponsored films that have survived is probably even smaller. It is difficult to know which have not survived because there is no census of such films, no catalogue of such films, and we risk really losing a valuable part of our medical and scientific heritage as a result. As my example of the cancer film shows, I only knew that Reward of Courage had once existed and that it was in all likelihood the earliest ever cancer film because I had compiled a list of all the cancer films I could identify, those surviving and those not, and was able to go looking for that missing film. Such a census gives us a clue as to how we might begin to make rational choices about which films to look for and which to prioritize in terms of conservation and preservation, given the high cost of this. These films are important cultural resources for understanding historical, visual, and the historical, visual and material culture of medicine and science. But they are a vulnerable resource, costly to preserve and to restore. Too many films have already been lost, and others are neglected, silently decomposing as I speak. Thank you very much.